Sure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and with me today is Elena Maria Vidal, the author of many books, including a biography on Marie Antoinette, and the book we're here to discuss today, My Queen, My Love, a novel of Henrietta Maria. But first, we have some alarming news that Elena would like to share with us. Go ahead, Elena.
Hello, Connor. Thank you so much for having me today. And as you know, when I was trying to find the Zoom link for this podcast, which you had sent to me on Twitter, I realized that I have been put in Twitter jail. That is, I'm not allowed to post my anything on Twitter for the next 9 hours. I have been locked out of Twitter. And it was kind of startling for me because I made it through the entire Trump presidency without once getting put in Twitter jail or Facebook jail. And so I was suddenly shocked that I could not, just when I really needed the information to reach you, I could not get hold of it. And so it was a little bit of a panic, but luckily I was able to work that out through, because the information had showed up on my regular email. But that just shows how, they said that Twitter said that I broke some of their rules and guidelines, and I have no idea how I would have done that because I'm not posting anything different from the kinds of things I usually post.
Yeah.
And I think that it just might be that it's interesting that today is the day before the consecration to the Immaculate Heart. And so, I just think that there's a lot of spiritual warfare going on right now, and all kinds of odd things in the air. So who knows? But anyway, Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It is amazing. I can't sometimes I feel like when I hear about people getting banned from Twitter or getting banned for a couple hours or something like that, I've never had it hit so close to reality for me. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Word from our affiliate, Bishop Sheen Rosaries. You've probably worn through the chain of your cheap plastic rosary. Other rosaries simply can't stand up to the wear and tear of everyday life. Bishop Sheen rosaries are made of solid metal beads and paracord to withstand any condition and are backed with a lifetime warranty. Upgrade your rosary to a Bishop Sheen rosary made to fit your lifestyle or buy one for a friend. Each rosary sold supplies 2 weeks of food for a school kid in Uganda. You use the exclusive link down below to help support our efforts here at Plotlines. The link will take you to sheenrosaries.com. Be sure to use the code Plotlines10.
Well, it's when you're trying to, you actually have a use of these things, need information that I could only get from there at the time. And so I was really kind of startled that they would choose today of all times to do that. It's just an odd kind of a coincidence, but who knows? And of course, the fact that this would happen the day I'm going to be being interviewed by you is really annoying because I know for the other podcasts that the other interview we had, a lot of people of my family and friends and readers really enjoyed it, and a lot of people listened to it. So I think that was interesting. So anyway, well, here we are. So you can talk about Henrietta Maria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm very happy people have been listening to it. Again, it was a great. I think it was a great episode, and I had a great time.
It was.
I had a great time talking to you. So
yes. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me, and I'm very honored to be here.
Yeah.
And your podcasts are great. I see more and more of them around the internet, and you are really getting some really fabulous, famous people, and who I admire. I've seen a lot of the people you've interviewed, so I think it's really, really fantastic what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think
Sure.
the devil has been very much after my podcast. Very much. There's a lot of things that have happened that I feel like have been the devil attacking either me or people I know, or stop trying to stop this podcast.
Well, yeah, just today. I mean, just
Yeah,
today that I couldn't
exactly.
get through to you.
Well,
Yeah, no, that was definitely, and that's never happened before. All the times I've been on, all the times that I was fighting with people on Twitter and everything over Trump and all that, nothing like this ever happened before. So that shows that, yeah, you've made somebody irate. So that's actually a good sign.
it's it's like a compliment, I think.
It is. It is. I hate to say it, but it is.
I
Absolutely.
think I'm undeserving of it, but let them think what they
Well,
want.
we're all instruments. We're all undeserving in our own way, but when you allow yourself to be an instrument of the Lord and to get knowledge to people that otherwise they have no access to, and if they do have access to it, they don't know quite exactly what voice to listen to, because there's so many different voices saying different things, contradicting each other. So you're
True.
giving a clear voice and a clear sign to people of where to go to find out information, truth, and the truth of history. Because as we know, whoever controls history of a country controls the present of the country, controls the future of the country. And that is why when communists take over, they try to immediately rewrite the history. Well, the fascists too, the Nazis did the same. Well, of course, the Nazis were kind of glorified communists, but they try to rewrite history. And because if they can change the people's understanding of history, then the people will be more malleable and more easy to control.
Yeah.
So that is why. Yes.
Destroying people's memory, of course.
Exactly. And we see that in our own country with everyone running around tearing down statues of founding fathers and famous soldiers and everything. And because if people can destroy the memory of the past, even memory of negative things and bad things like slavery, that if they can destroy our memory of those things, that they happened, then we won't be as careful about justice but see, they want us to be careful in another way that completely oppresses white people. Like this critical race theory is so evil and very against the human dignity of everybody, as far as I'm concerned. But the whole thing with the English Civil War, the English Civil War was kind of a prelude to the French Revolution, which of course was a prelude to the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century and the 21st century, and we wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for the English Civil War, because the English Civil War was a follow-up of the Protestant Revolt, of Henry VIII's revolt against the church and him starting his own church, of the head of the secular state becoming the head of the church in his own country, and therefore replacing the sovereign pontiff. And when Henry VIII did that revolt, when he revolted, it kind of opened up the way for later the next generation. They had already revolted against the church, so now they revolted against the king, who in England, the king was the head of the church. And so it was about 100 years after Henry had broken away and destroyed the monasteries, closed down the monasteries. And as people will see when they read my new book, My Queen, My Love, which is the first of a trilogy about Henrietta Maria of France, the Queen of Charles I, they will see that a lot of the country homes and manors and beautiful mansions that she visits throughout her course of her life in England used to be monasteries and had been closed down and given to wealthy aristocratic families. And she's always horrified when she finds out there had been monks or nuns there, and that it was now being used for secular purposes. But anyway, I should let you ask me a question.
Well, actually, so I liked what you said about Henry VIII. It reminds me actually of sort of what we just said about sort of getting rid of the people's memory. Is what he did was he confused people. He confused the memory of the people from the true faith.
Absolutely. Absolutely, he did. And that was carried on by Charles the First. Charles the First was, I mean, he was actually, a wonderful man. I mean,
Yes.
you and I would have loved sitting down and talking to him. I mean, he would have been our favorite person. But the thing is, he had been brought up to be, he was the second son, so he hadn't really been brought up to be king until his older brother died. But he was brought up in the Church of England, and his father, James the First, who was the first Stuart king of England and the first king to be king of England and of Scotland. He had been king of Scotland first. He was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. Charles the First was a grandson of Mary, Queen of Scots. And but they were not Catholic. They wanted to be the Church of England. They wanted the Church of England to have the grandeur of liturgy and the majesty of the beauty of liturgy, such as the Roman Church, but they didn't want saints. They didn't want. They wanted some holy days, but they didn't want a lot of holy days like in the past. So they were trying to say that this was what the original church had been. That they were harking back to the early church, and not to things that had happened in the Middle Ages. The medieval church, that they had gotten rid of the medieval church, and now they were restoring the original British church. That's what they were trying to say, and that's what Charles I and his Archbishop of Canterbury, who was Archbishop Laud, that is very much what they said, and they were very, people. I had this argument with some people who try to say that Charles I was a Catholic convert to Catholicism and that he is a Catholic martyr. And, I hate to tell people this, but he never converted to Catholicism. In fact, on the way to his execution, he told his daughter to uphold the Protestant religion and gave her some Protestant books, recommended Protestant authors for her to read. And actually, but at that moment, she was in a prisoner. His daughter Elizabeth was a prisoner, and little Henry too. They were prisoners of Puritans. And actually, at the time, the books he recommended for them were really ways to get them away from, clear their mind of Puritanism. Then the Puritanism hated any ritual, and he didn't want any hierarchy, didn't want bishops, it didn't want any ceremonies at all. It didn't even want music. They didn't even want music in worship music. And so he was Charles wanted to protect his daughter from that and keep her in the Church of England, but he also didn't want her to become Catholic because he knew once he was not there, his wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, the heroine of my novel, my trilogy, would try to convert all of the children, which she always was trying to do. And so he did not want them. He wanted them to be part of the Church of England, which was what the English royal family he thought should belong to. And also, he went with the Bishop of London accompanied him to the scaffold. And I think that, and he did die a martyr because he would not sacrifice what his vision of the Church of England, which he saw as having hierarchy and having liturgical ceremonies and having vestments and holy days, feast days, and he would not sacrifice that even to save his life. Because they said if he had become a Presbyterian or whatever, there were a lot of different shades of weird Protestant sects, and not so, and then regular mainstream ones like Presbyterianism and everything. There were all kinds of different little sects beginning in England at the time. There were the Puritans, and there were the Anabaptists were starting up, and the Quakers, and there were the people they just called themselves independents. Because they just didn't really want to have anything to do with an organized church, but they wanted to worship God by reading the Bible and having prayer meetings together and everything. So
you've given
Charles.
Well, before you
go ahead.
Continue. I think you've given us a good background on sort of the state in England, and I'd like to first ask. So for everyone listening, where's the best place to buy your book? My Queen, My Love.
Yes. The best place right now, the best place to buy it is from Amazon. And now they're trying to get it on Tumblr House, which has my book, Marie Antoinette, Daughter of the Caesars. But For some reason they're not able to get it because they have to get it through certain distributors. But right now, the main place to get the only place to get my book actually is from Amazon. And it is available on Kindle, and it is available in paperback.
Yeah, everyone should get it. It's an absolute page turner. It's a lovely book, and you do a very nice job.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you read it. Wonderful. Oh,
yes,
I'm so honored.
Of course, I read it, and it's wonderful.
I'm delighted to hear that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for writing it. I really appreciate it. I needed some modern historical fiction.
Yes. Well, the thing is, I try to make it, it's told as a story so that it is a work of art. A novel is a work of art. It's like a painting brought to life so that you can come to an understanding and an experience of the history that you don't get just from reading a nonfiction history book. It's more like entering into a movie or a picture or a painting that's what I try to make my works. Now, there are 2 more books coming. This is going to be a trilogy. And the second book is called Generalissima. I'm working on it now, and it's about the English Civil War. I'm really going to go into some detail, and I'm going to explore the experience of the English Civil War, not only from the point of view of Queen Henrietta Maria, who had quite an exciting time, but also from the points of view of some of her children. And see, the whole family was separated, and they were never together again. Not to give too many spoilers, but their whole family, and they had been very close, very loving family. And but they all, this is how they survived, is that they did, some of them survived, is that they did separate so that they weren't all together to be killed like the Romanovs, or even the French royal family. So they were all separated, and so some of them were able to go on, but Henrietta Maria had to go to Holland to raise money for the war. They had no money. Charles I had no money to fight a war at all. He barely had money to keep the government going because he had many disagreements with Parliament. Parliament accused him of being a Catholic, which he wasn't, but because at Henrietta Maria's request, he let Catholics out of prison, and he allowed Henrietta Maria to have her own chapels and have the Mass in every one of her houses, she had several houses and palaces around the country, and she was able to, and they were open. She wanted them to be open to the public. She had Capuchins to minister to the poor, and all of this was completely against the laws of England. So Henrietta Maria was the queen, but she was also the #1 lawbreaker. Anyway, so so Parliament was trying to make Charles really persecute the Catholics, and he already was charging them recusancy fines just for not going to the Protestant services. Sure. And they were the Anglican services. So he was collecting, that's part of how they ran the government is fines from Catholics. And anyway, Henrietta Maria had to raise money for him. So she sold the crown jewels in Holland, and it was able to get tanks and all kinds of not tanks, cannons.
It's okay. Ukraine's on our mind.
I need more. Yeah, Ukraine's on our mind. Yeah, they were the tanks. They were able to get cannons and horses and armor and swords and weapons and all kinds of things to and then bring them. She brought them over, and then she led this army into England from across the ocean. And of course the parliamentarians were after her the whole time, and they tried to sink her ship. Her ship almost sank, and they were firing cannons on her, and it was cannonballs. Anyway, it was a really was a lot of harrowing experiences.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that should be a good one. It's going to be longer. And then the third one is going to be called Avalon.
Oh, okay.
And Avalon is the name they first gave to, Queen Henrietta Maria was behind the founding of the state of Maryland, which was named after her, Mary's Land. And she was supposed as a refuge for Catholics. And the Calvert family who founded it, part of their title was they were the lords of Maryland and Avalon. And Avalon, of course, was where King Arthur went, they said, after his last battle. So the whole thing of King Arthur and the whole mystery of Britain and the destiny of Britain, of Christian Britain, is kind of intertwined with the whole saga of Charles I and Henrietta Maria, and the whole mystery of the Holy Grail and all that. I'm trying to entwine all of that with maybe not the real Holy Grail, the chalice or anything, but the whole thing of the quest.
Yeah,
I'm trying to work that in, and so Avalon, the final book, Avalon, is going to be Henrietta Maria after, her husband is going to be executed, and it's going to be how she is able to go on with her life and her family and try to rebuild things. And eventually they do get restored to England. And she has a lot to do with that. She never gave up trying to get her son, Charles II, restored to the throne.
Yeah. Yeah, no, especially the family aspect is what I'm most looking forward to, especially in the English Civil War one. I think that I don't really know of any great books that, or even like films or narratives just in general that go into this this history.
No, I don't either. There have been the few novels that were written in the last century. There was Margaret Irwin wrote some historical novels. She wrote one called Royal Flush, was about the youngest daughter, Minette, Henriette Anne, who was the youngest daughter of Charles I and Henrietta Maria, who married Louis XIV's brother. And she was a very devout Catholic. And there was a book about her, and it had the family, the Stuart family in it. And then they also had, there's another book by Margaret Irwin called The Bride. And it's actually about the Winter Queen, Charles I's sister, and her daughter Louise, and how they were in exile in Holland during their exile in Holland. And it has the Stuarts are coming and going. But see, they're always characters on the periphery. They're not. I don't know any novel. There's a couple novels about Henrietta Maria, but there's one I think where she is the heroine. It's called Queen of the Cavaliers. But I think it's kind of a torrid romance novel. It has her having a love affair with Henry German, which I really don't think. The more I read about her and how much she was so in love with her husband, I really just can't see her having an affair with anybody else, or even being tempted to have an affair. She just loved her husband so much. I mean, they were just so soulmates and everything. And so no, there really isn't anything about Henrietta Maria, and there's nothing about her and her family. Fictional things. So I really want to get into the children, and especially James, who James ended up, being James II and losing the throne to his daughter and son-in-law, William and Mary, and then their their sister Anne, and then Anne let the whole thing be inherited by their distant cousins from the House of Hanover, who were grandchildren of the Winter Queen, Charles I's sister, Elizabeth Stuart. So the thing is, you don't really see James in any stories. I mean, nobody does anything with James. And James is actually one of the most interesting of the family. And he actually made a living for a long time as a soldier. He was one of the few kings of England who had actually seen action on the battle, other than Charles I. Charles I did, but after he became king. But James I was one of the few to ever, James II, was the first to ever see battle and on the battlefield before he became king. Because as a young man, he was a professional soldier.
Fighting in France, right?
Yeah, fighting in France and then he had to fight with Spain against France, which really upset him. I'll go into all that. And of course, Charles II was involved, and he saw battles. That was both the boys were at, I think they were the first battle of Edge Hill with their father. And he wanted his sons with him. And apparently these battles none of them had actually seen a real battle, including Charles I had never seen a real battle. And Charles II, he was the Prince of Wales, and James was Duke of York, and they had never seen a battle. And I think the first sight of a battle and cannonballs landing on people and blowing them up, I think it was all very, very disturbing. And so after that, they, I don't think they were right there sitting on the edge of the battle anymore, but they were there. They were in and out of the battlefield, and they were there with one of them was usually with their father. And then they decided it would be safer if they all separated. But I'll sort that all out in my in this novel I'm working on now.
Yeah.
Now the thing with Henrietta Maria, what a lot of people don't realize, they think she was just forcing her way on Charles, and she was a very devout Catholic, so she was forcing that on Charles. But people don't realize that Henrietta Maria was the goddaughter of the Pope. The Pope was her godfather.
Yes.
And that she had been at 15 when she was sent to England to marry Charles. She was told that it was up to her to restore England to the Catholic faith, and that was her mission. She was had to do that. In fact, the Pope gave her, before she even set foot on England, the Pope sent her the Golden Rose on Laetare Sunday, which is what every year the Pope would give a golden rose to a Catholic monarch or ruler who was had defended the faith. And so Henrietta Maria, before she even set foot in England, she received the Golden Rose.
Before she
and
was
it was
a ruler.
more of before she was even a ruler. I mean, she had been married by proxy, so she was officially the queen.
Oh, okay.
But she had not even seen her country. She had not even seen her country yet, and she was going to be. This was to tell her, she had to be firm in her faith and make a stand for her faith. And so she did, even though it caused her to be unpopular. And it actually turned a lot of some of the English people against her, which ended up being very, very sad. But all of that, I mean, she was sent like as if she were Joan of Arc or something, that this is your mission. You must do this. And, if you do this, everyone's going to be very disappointed in you, from the Pope to the Holy Roman Emperor to everybody is going to be very disappointed in you if you don't convert your husband and convert England and bring England back to the faith. Now, the thing is that Charles I he was desperate to marry Henrietta Maria because she had a huge dowry. And he really needed the money. And also he wanted to marry into the French royal family. He wanted to marry somebody, from the higher ranks of royal families. The French royal family was kind of at the top of the totem pole, and he wanted to marry into that family and have an alliance with France. So he said whatever he thought he had to say to the Pope and to Henrietta Maria's mother, Marie de Medici, and to her brother, Louis XIII. He promised, he said, I'm going to do everything to try to get my country back into the church. And Henrietta Maria, I'm just going to be allowed to bring up the children until they're 13. And I mean, he really made it sound like he was ready to practically to become a Catholic. And so they were all, in fact, to this day, people read his letters that are at the Vatican, and people think, he was really a Catholic. He wanted to become a Catholic. But the thing is, you have to look at his actions. I mean, the things he wrote were totally different from how he behaved, and he had no intention of ever becoming a Catholic. He kept fining Catholics with recusancy fines all during his reign, and he was not going to, Catholics were thrown in prison for practicing their faith. Now, sometimes he would let the priests out during the day so they could minister to people, and then they had to just show up at the prison again at night. There was that, but it was not a... He was not at any time ready to join the church. He very much believed in his Anglican church, and that it was had more in common with the early church than he saw the Roman church was man-made and all that, things that Protestants still say to this day. And that's kind of how
Yeah.
Charles I saw it. But he did truly love Henrietta Maria. He and Henrietta Maria really truly came to love each other after a very rocky beginning, which I describe in my novel, My Queen, My Love. They had a very, very rocky beginning, partly because of the Duke of Buckingham, who was a very, very controversial figure at the English court. He was a very, now, Charles's father, I don't know if you don't want me to talk about Charles' father, maybe I'll let you ask the question.
I actually think we should get back to where you begin in the in the novel, but right before that, I just think it'd be interesting. I don't know what you think about this, but I feel like you and Charles Coulomb should discuss the merits of Charles and his, like, how Catholic he was. I feel like that'd be an interesting debate.
That would be nice. I'd love for us to discuss that. I've sent him we've had a few little disagreements online, and he does not agree with me, and that's fine. You know, I have the highest regard for his research. In fact, he suggested books for me to read, which really helped me understand Charles. Charles the First was as Catholic as he could be.
Sure.
Because he believed in, tradition to a degree. He believed in the having a ritual, and he believed in transubstantiation, and he believed in, but he just believed that it happened in his ritual as well as in the Roman. He didn't believe in the Mass the way we believe in it. I shouldn't say that, because I don't know exactly what he believed about. I think he kind of believed what Anglicans believe, High Church Anglicans. They believe in transubstantiation. He believed in having beautiful liturgy. He believed in having beautiful music at church. He believed in the bishops having a hierarchy, because he said this was the only way to have a Christian monarchy, was to have a church with bishops and a majestic liturgy. He said this was the only way. They went together. He believed they went together. So he had a very Catholic view of the world and of a lot of things. And, his mother was a secret Catholic. Queen Anne of Denmark was a secret Catholic. She was never as brazen about being Catholic as Henrietta Maria was. But she was she was secretly a convert, and she kind of did her best in her own way. Now, Henrietta Maria was very outspoken, outward, yes, and as much as she could. She was not harsh or cruel to people who weren't Catholic at all, not at all. But she was not hiding her faith. I mean, she wore a beautiful diamond cross that the Pope had sent her, and she showed everybody and said, "This is from the Pope," and everything. And the people around her, everybody around her, they may have started out being Protestant, but by the time, most of them, except for a few diehard Protestants, most of them did become Catholic just from being in her household. Yeah. And she was a very loving person. She was loved beauty. She loved exquisite taste, architecture. She loved theater, and she put on wonderful plays, which they called masks. And she would perform in them and sing. She had a beautiful, beautiful voice. And she sang and danced on stage. And of course, that's when Charles I first saw her in Paris, when he saw her dancing in a ballet. And that's kind of when they believe he really fell in love with her for the first time, when he first saw her as a young girl dancing, and she didn't know he was there. And then later he wrote beautiful letters to her, and she kind of fell in love with him through his letters. So before they even really saw each other in the light of day, they already had a bond that was probably, a fairly deep romantic bond. And I think she influenced Charles without him realizing that he was actually very close to being Catholic in the way he lived his life and everything, but he could never take the final step. It was kind of like C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, because of how he was brought up. He was brought up by Church of Ireland, who were very anti-Catholic, and he could never make the final. There was such prejudice in his mind against the Church of Rome. He could never make the final step to become Catholic, in spite of being close friends with J.R.R. Tolkien. Well, see, to me, I think it's the same exact thing with Charles I. In spite of having Henrietta Maria and loving her so much and everything, he just couldn't bring himself to make that final step. But see, also, he had Archbishop Laud, who was kind of his spiritual advisor. And Archbishop Laud, I think, kept him from going this final step to becoming Catholic. I think if it hadn't been for Archbishop Laud, because there were like Catholic priests who were close friends of Charles I, like Father Conn, who was a Scottish priest. And he and Charles I would debate the faith a lot. And they'd debate different things. And actually but Father Conn himself realized that Charles was never going to make that final step. And he might, but it would be a miracle. And so he wrote the Vatican and asked the Pope and the Cardinal, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Barberini, if they would stop pressuring Charles to convert. He said, you've got to stop that because it's just not going to happen now. And you're just aggravating things and making it worse for Charles's relationship with Parliament. See, I think once Father Conn spent a lot of time, and I spent 3 years in London with the royal family. I mean, he was right with them, and they would have dinner all the time and everything.
Yeah,
and
your dinner conversations are very very good scenes. I really
good.
like those.
Oh, I'm so glad. Good.
Especially with Father Conn and Charles.
Yeah, and they were both Scottishmen. Scotsmen, I should say. Scotsmen love to debate, and as anybody knows, and so do Irishmen, and they loved a good debate. And so but Father Conn could see the anti-Catholic sentiment in England was so strong that the Puritans hated the Anglican Church because they thought it was too Catholic. All right. So they not only could you not be like Catholic, they believed being Catholic was like being a pagan. You were worse than being a pagan. They believed it was pure paganism, and that it was just the most evil thing you could be. And like Cromwell himself had very little scruple about having Catholics put to death, and especially Irish Catholics, which is I'm going to go into that in my second book too. There was a lot of very strong anti-Catholic and anti-Irish sentiments during the Civil War, and a lot of people in Ireland suffered horrendously because of that. And anyway, so that is really pretty much why Charles I, he just was not going to become a Catholic, and he never did become one. Now, I'm not, as I said. And we got into this, Charles Colomb and I got into this a little bit online, and Leanda de Lisle, who is a real scholar. And I'm not saying that I'm not and that Charles Colomb isn't, but Leanda de Lisle is a specialist on Charles I and Henrietta Maria, and she is working on a biography just about Henrietta Maria, which is coming out in May.
Interesting.
And Leanda de Lisle was the one who told me and I've been corresponding with her on my own and getting some information for her. And I actually gave her some information too that she didn't have before.
That's great.
But she said that she's the one who told me that Charles was charging Catholics recusancy fines all during his reign. That the Catholics did not go to the Anglican prayer church service. They had to pay a fine, and sometimes a very high fine. Yeah. And that's actually part of how he was financed his government. Now, Leanda de Lisle, I told her about Henrietta Maria wore an Agnus Dei, a gold locket, heart-shaped locket around her neck, that a lot of books mention she wore this locket while she was expecting a baby and she wouldn't take it off. And that was actually, her mother had sent it to her, and it was an Agnus Dei, which was a little piece of wax from the Paschal candle. And it was blessed by the Pope, and it had a special blessing for expectant mothers. Yeah. And Henrietta Maria wore that all during her 9 pregnancies. And finally, she had to, when she was escaping from England, she took it off and gave it to a poor woman who was starving, a mother with a little child who was starving in the street. And Henrietta Maria gave this poor woman her that was all she had to give at that point. Wow. She gave this poor woman her gold locket to buy some food for her child. Anyway, that's very interesting. But
you talked about Queen Marie de Medici, and you start with her in your book, and I think she's very interesting. What it seems like you would say that she is misunderstood. Would you agree?
Yes. She's another one that is just kind of dismissed as being I see people describe her as stupid. That Marie de Medici was stupid. Well, the thing is, Henry IV had already arranged. He was assassinated, but before he was assassinated, he had already arranged that in case something happened to him, his wife, Queen Marie de Medici, the mother of his children, would be the regent.
Is that
he
normal?
Would not have left. That was, because it was normal in that it had happened to the Catherine de Medici, the wife of Henry II. She was regent, and so there was a precedent for the Queen being a regent. In fact, there had been another time Charles VIII, when he was a little boy, his sister Anne of France was the regent for him. So there have been several times when, even though in France only only a man can be a king because they have the Salic law, only a man can inherit the throne. But that's because when at their coronation, the king receives, in his anointing, he receives holy orders.
Yeah,
and that's why only a man can be the king. But this still doesn't mean that.
What level of holy orders? Like deacon?
All right, I think it's
or subdeacon.
They had several stages. Yeah, something. Yeah. I think it was subdeacon. It was because they could drink from the chalice. The king could drink from the chalice at mass. He was the only one among laymen. The queen could, at her coronation, the queen could drink from the chalice.
Okay.
And so it was and the same thing was with the Tsar. The Tsar was also, the people don't know this, but the Tsar was, when he was at his coronation, he actually is the one who offered the what they don't call it mass, the divine liturgy, but he is actually the one who offered, offered mass at his own. He was a priest.
Really?
Had the priesthood? Yes.
I guess that makes sense in the Orthodox tradition, having married priests and such. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, and that's why they had to be married before they were crowned, but that all came after Tsar Paul. Before that, they had women. Women were anointed and became the empress. The Empress Catherine and everything. The Tsar Paul imposed the Salic law on Russia and on the Russian.
What year was that?
That was in whenever he became around 18. Let's see, when did he? Around 1800. I think is when he became, or late 1790s, 1800 was when Tsar Paul became. He also belonged to the Order of Malta, which is interesting. There's a whole interesting story there.
So there can't be a Tsarina in the future. Is that what you're telling me?
No, not unless they can change the law.
Sure.
That all depends on if they change. I mean, at this point, who knows what the laws are or anything? But I'm just saying that in old Russia. Yeah, there are no laws. They'd have to. Yeah, exactly. So So I don't know what it is now. I think that a lot of the Romanov family, from what I have heard, still there are people who claim to be the front of the claimants of the throne, but don't actually have. Some of those people don't actually have the best claim. Some of the people with the better claim to the throne are people that you don't hear as much about.
Interesting.
And everything. So we could have a whole talk just about that. But I've listened to, that's very interesting. So I don't really know. But anyway, so back to Marie de Medici. Marie de Medici was, her husband was a very great king. All right. He has a lot of personal faults. I mean, he chased women like there was no tomorrow. But the thing is, and he had a lot of illegitimate children. But the thing is, he was a very good ruler and administrator. And as far as getting the country organized and getting the country rebuilt after the wars of religion had torn everything apart. And He was very good at that, and he was very good at building up the country again and making it prosperous and good to the people, the poor people, and just. He was a very just ruler. And he would not have left a stupid woman to reign over France at that time of history, because it was a very critical time of history. They were still recovering from the wars of religion, and he would not have left his wife as regent and asked that she be regent if he thought she was stupid. He just wouldn't have done it. So he had regard for her judgment and for her ability to make this important major decisions. He also knew that she was the best person to protect his son, the king, the new little king, Louis XIII. He knew that Louis XIII would be safest with his mother protecting him. Now, they had a lot of problems in the family, a lot of problems with Louis and his mother disagreeing all the time. And because Marie de Medici, her mother was a Habsburg, and she did not think, she thought, she was very frightened by that, not frightened, but she was appalled by how the Protestant revolt was spreading through Europe and had really taken over whole entire countries and everything. And she thought that all the Catholic countries, instead of fighting each other, they should band together. And if they would band together, they could kind of halt this spread of the Protestant taking over everything. But the thing is, her son, Louis XIII, became very influenced by Cardinal Richelieu, who Marie de Medici actually raised to power. Cardinal de Richelieu and Louis XIII, they had this idea of make France great again. And make France great again meant you will make, France is not going to become a satellite of the Holy Roman Empire. France is going to be the greatest country in the world, and we're going to do that, even if we have to make alliances with Protestant countries or whatever we have to do, but we're going to do it. And that's kind of what happened. So she didn't mind France. I mean, she married her daughters to the King of Spain, and she didn't mind. And of course, then the King of Spain sent his daughter, Anne of Austria, who was a Spanish princess, to marry Louis XIII. And so she wanted them all to get along, and then kind of, she also wanted peace. She didn't want the country involved in any wars. Marie de Medici didn't, and she wanted the country to become prosperous again before they started fighting. But the thing is, Louis XIII, once he became of age, he was under the influence of Cardinal de Richelieu, well, other people too, and but really, once Cardinal de Richelieu started to take over, he was very he was very, very powerful and completely. Louis did whatever Cardinal Richelieu said practically, even though not all the time. Louis still thought for himself a lot. I mean, I'm not saying he always had the final word, and you can see that from his letters. There's a very, very good book that I read for this called Louis XIII the Just, and it was by someone whose last name is Moot, Moote, and it was actually an excellent book on Louis XIII, and it described everything, how he really was his own man, and he had a lot of personal problems and a lot of really serious health problems, but he wanted France to be the greatest country. All right, and then Louis XIV, his son, went on with that and made France the greatest country in the world, according to how they saw it. So that is Marie de Medici. Though she did not want war, she wanted France to be Catholic, was most important to her, and but she did have a falling out with Louis, her son, and Cardinal de Richelieu, and was sent into exile, and she ended up dying in very intense poverty at the home of the artist Van Dyck, Rubens, the one who she had brought Rubens to paint the 24 painting series of her life, the life of Marie de Medici. And she and Rubens were good friends. And anyway, Rubens gave her a house in Germany, and where she died in an attic or something. She ended up being very poor and having nothing but, And of course, I have my own reasons why I think that may have happened, and that's in the book. So I add some things that based on research. I mean, as educated, it's not just something I made up out of thin air. Based on my research, I came to some other conclusions, which I think may have contributed to the downfall of Marie de Medici.
Yeah.
And but she was a very interesting person. She's overlooked a lot. She had incredible taste. I mean, she brought incredible art and gardens and architecture to Paris, which beautiful things that are there today. And of course, she was a Medici, and she'd grown up in Florence, so she had all of that art and culture and everything in her blood. And she passed all that on to Henrietta Maria. Henrietta Maria had that wonderful taste and the ability to discern good art from bad art, and to pick who the great artists are and who to patronize. And so Henrietta Maria brought that to England, and she also brought. People don't realize this, but Henrietta Maria did a lot to bring beautiful music and music that was only on the continent, choral music and sacred music, liturgical music. Henrietta Maria brought the music of great composers to be in her chapels throughout the country. And had beautiful choirs and then just the most exquisite music, because she wanted to win people to the Catholic faith through beauty. So she had the great art, beautiful music, beautiful, the buildings themselves were magnificent. So and she was succeeding, because there were a lot of aristocrats were converting to the Catholic faith, which of course had Parliament and the Protestants and the Puritans all very upset.
Yes. It's interesting. It sounds like Maria de Medici kind of wanted a sort of Congress of Vienna, that happened after the Napoleonic Wars, something to restore the order. But in this case, instead of at the Congress of Vienna, where it was all about ideology, it was about religion and order in her mindset.
Yes, I think that is the sort of thing she would have wanted to have peace. She thought peace was most important, and the Catholic faith and protecting the faith was most important. And whether France, she wanted France to be successful, but she didn't care about France being like the greatest country in the world. Whereas Louis the 13th, and he had this vision of France as was the greatest country in the world. France is going to be the country, and so that was. Louis the 14th did that too, and of course that's why his wars ended up. The wars of Louis the 14th ended up really bankrupting France long before. They blame everything on Marie Antoinette, but long before Marie Antoinette, even was dreamed of, France was already in terrible financial problem.
Yeah, it sounds like Charles I and the Duke of Buckingham was doing the same thing to bankrupt themselves.
Oh, yeah. No, they both were completely obsessed with war. They wanted to be, Buckingham had been the favorite of King James. And so, which everyone just assumed, not everyone, but many people assumed that it was a homosexual relationship. So Charles didn't like that. He didn't like it that people were saying that about his father or his friend. And then, of course, Buckingham didn't like it that people were saying that about him. So Buckingham had to go out of his way to show that he was, all man, and that he could lead an army, and that he was a great warrior. And he had a painting. He had, I think it was Rubens, paint a painting of him on horseback leading an army, of course, which he had never done. He'd never led an army. The few times he did lead an army, it was complete disaster. Every time he had anything to do with a war, 5,000 men would be killed, and ships would sink, and it was a complete disaster. The Spanish just completely, first they tried to attack Spain, and they had the siege of Cadiz, and the English were completely annihilated by the whole thing. So then they decided to attack France in order to help the French Huguenots who were being attacked by Louis the 13th and Cardinal Richelieu. So Charles and Buckingham decided they were going to help the French Protestants by attacking Louis the 13th. And of course, that's his brother-in-law at this point, because he was married to Henrietta Maria. And they used Henrietta Maria's dowry, which had, of course, come from France. She had brought with her some
Yeah.
gold bullion. They actually used her dowry, which could have paid for her own household and her own maintenance for at least a decade. They used that to finance a very expensive war, which was very wasteful because neither of them really knew what they were doing.
Mhm.
And thousands of men were killed. And then the soldiers who weren't killed, who were wounded, they were not being given the care. A lot of them were beggars. They couldn't work because they had lost limbs, and they weren't getting cared for. And a lot of them had never been paid for the first war, and here they were being sent to a second war, which is how we get to the Buckingham's assassination, which was actually the best thing that could have happened to Charles. It was too late. The only problem, it came too late to really save him the mess that he had already gotten himself into.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so Buckingham, Charles never really, some people say Charles really never had a chance because Buckingham was his father's favorite and was held up to him as the be all and no, of all fount of wisdom, which he was not at all. Buckingham had not only gotten where he was because he was a good looking guy. And he was witty and fun and charming. Okay. And he looked good in tights and could ride horses well and everything like that. So that's how he got to where he was. But he was not a good politician. He was not a good person. He really set the tone, the early tone of the reign of Charles I, and it really got off to a really bad start, and it really never got any better. He also practically destroyed the marriage of Henrietta Maria and Charles because he did not want Charles to listen to anyone else. And he could see that Charles had fallen in love with Henrietta Maria, and he did not want her to get more influence over him than Buckingham did at the time. So Buckingham was trying to undermine her constantly. He didn't care whether or not they had children. He just wanted to keep them apart. So he did everything to destroy their marriage. So, and of course, he didn't destroy it. They ended up having a wonderful marriage, a very close marriage, and almost an ideal marriage.
Yeah, I that makes sense, and I think everyone should go out and get your novel, My Queen, My Love.
Oh, thank you.
Novel of Henrietta Maria. I think we'll have to pick up talking about Buckingham and Charles and more in detail and more in depth, another time.
Another time, sure.
Yes. Will you plug your website?
Yes, my website is called Tea at Trianon. I discuss history and books and movies and politics, manners, morals, all kinds of things. And it's called Tea at Trianon, and a blog by Elena Maria Vidal. So please visit me there. And also I can be found on Facebook. I have Elena Maria Vidal page. And of course I'd like to say I'm found on Twitter, but for the next 8 hours or so, I will be found on Twitter. But otherwise I'm there, Elena Maria Vidal. So anyway, but thank you so much for having me, Connor. And we could talk for another 5 hours about all these things.
We could. That would be very possible, and I'd enjoy it. Well, that just means we have more to talk about on a future episode. But thank you for coming on. I will put all of your links in the description so people can find
thank you.
And
thank you.
I hope everyone will buy the book, and for supporting you, and then for supporting me, if everyone would like, share, and subscribe, so you can know when I post videos and have more guests on. So please do so. And again, thank you for coming on. It was wonderful talking to you.